Hey guys, I'm back. Today's recording day. I'm really excited about it. I just got back from a gynecologist appointment. I'm in my mom's Jeep, so that's why you probably can't see me over the steering wheel. But I hope you stay tuned because today's video is going to be very interesting, very raw, emotional, and it's vlog day and I'm super excited. I'm in a great mood. How about you? Hey guys, it's Wednesday. I was supposed to start my vlog on Saturday, but here we are. Things happen. So this week's vlog, I want to talk about mental illness and mental. So this week's vlog, I want to talk about mental illness and mental health and how it has affected my life. And I just want to explain a bit to you guys because some people, they don't understand a lot about it. Sorry, I'm on a really squeaky chair, but it's spins, so it's awesome. I'm in a great mood today. Today is a good day. Today's a really good day so far. I hope it stays that way. Well, the first time that I've ever experienced anything different in my life, I was probably about 9 or 10 years old. And I remember feeling sad all the time. Like I just wanted to cry for no reason and really overwhelmed. But at the time, my parents were kind of going through a breakup and there was a lot of fighting and arguing that went on. And I don't blame them because, I mean, being an adult and being on my own now, I know how much parents argue. It's just a thing. And that would cause me to get very overwhelmed and I would often cry about it. The first time I ever thought about suicide, I was 10 years old. And I know that's young to think about suicide, but I remember that day like it was yesterday. I remember harsh words coming from my father's mouth. I remember fighting and crying, and seeing my mother upset really hurt me. And at the time, I was very overwhelmed, and I didn't know how to deal with the emotions, being so young. And I remember we had a little Santa Claus that hung up on the ceiling. It was around Christmas time, and he was in a swing. And you guys all remember in the 90s, like, or 2000s, when our parents had those stupid ass hooks that they would hook the plants or lights onto. So I remember looking up at one of those beside the Santa Claus and looking at my mom and saying, I'm gonna hang myself. And like, for your 10-year-old daughter to say she's gonna hang herself, so many questions go through your head, like, how do you even know what that is? So, I actually knew what it was because my uncle had committed suicide the year before, and I knew how. I didn't know why, I didn't understand why. Of course, my mother took precautions and, you know, the police were called and I had to start seeing a counselor at 10 years old and writing in a diary about how I feel. This was hard for me because I wasn't able to really share my emotions and I didn't really understand why I was feeling these emotions. I remember sitting there with my counselor and there was like a sandbox and coloring books with markers, and she just wanted me to play in it while she observed me, and I didn't want to. I didn't want to. Like, I just sat there like, no, I don't want to do this. And I remember going home crying to my mom saying I don't want to go here anymore because I didn't understand what was going on. So it all came back. It stemmed back from my father having issues with alcohol. He abused alcohol. And of course, my mother being a single mother of 3 children, it was hard on her when my father was drunk or spending our money. And yes, I say single mother because she was there providing by herself while he was away doing his own thing. And I'm not here to bash my parents at all. I'm just speaking solely about my mental health and kind of where it stems from. yeah, so this was when I was 10, going on to like 11 and 12. And at this point, I saw a few different counselors. I was seeing a family counselor in Hamilton. I got to middle school, and I started to release these emotions through bullying others and making others feel like crap to make myself feel good, or to make my friends laugh to make me feel good, which obviously isn't right, and I regret it to this day very much. But I was very open about that with my counselors. I told them, like, I'm a bully. I am mean to people. I roll my eyes at people. I push people. I make fun of them. I call them names. I talk behind their back. And I was given strategies to work through this and help, and it just wasn't really working. And at the time, I just thought it was typical hormones, you know, I'm almost 13, I could do what I want. So I was sitting in her office, and it was at the top of a really high building in Hamilton, and I looked down at the window, and she said, "Tell me what you see." And I looked at her and I said, "Fat fucking people." And like, she was like, "What?" Instead of coming up with something positive, I come up with something negative and mean. So she handed me a whiteboard, and she asked me to draw my emotions on this whiteboard. And I didn't know how to draw my emotions. Like, what the fuck am I supposed to do with this? So I picked up the whiteboard, and this is what I drew. So that's what I drew. An X with a bunch of dark circles around it. At this point, she realized that I had been feeling, obviously, some dark thoughts or some confused thoughts. And she tried to work with me, and she asked me about my family, and I brought up my father being an alcoholic. And I remember her repeating that back to me, and she said, "So with your father being an alcoholic and all," and I was so offended. I was like, "You don't have the right to call my father an alcoholic." And I didn't even know what an alcoholic was. These are just words that I was hearing in my family, like, your father's an alcoholic, he struggles with alcohol. So I didn't want to go back to her. No, I wasn't going back. Here I am, I'm 13 years old now, and I think I can do what I want, and I pretty much set my own rules for myself. I started to smoke cigarettes. Mind you, my first cigarette was at 8. I started to smoke cigarettes, thought it was cool. I would have a drink of alcohol here and there. I started dating this guy who was 3 to 4 years older than me. And we were partying with people who were like 19, 20, 25, 30 years old. Sneaking out a lot, not so much sneaking out of the house, but pretending I'm somewhere else. And I just wanted to rebel. Like, I just wanted to do what normal 13-year-olds weren't doing. Like, the other 13-year-olds in my school were still wearing their, elementary clothes and reading their books and just being good humans. And I was like, fuck this, fuck you. I'm gonna smoke some weed, I'm gonna smoke some cigarettes. And like, so I started lying about drug abuse, saying that I was doing drugs. And at that point, I kind of knew, like, okay, I gotta calm down. I'm making a reputation for myself that's not right. It's not who I am. I'm very book smart, and I always have been book smart, and my passion actually was school, but I started to rebel against school because I thought it was cool, And then I got a little bit older, and I got in other relationships, and at 14 I started to experience with speed. Speed is a mixture of methamphetamine and whatever the fuck is under your kitchen cabinets. Speed brought me to a place in my life where I felt happy. I felt like on top of the world. I'm getting goosebumps talking about this. And this is where I noticed myself spiraling. My life was getting a little bit out of control. I didn't want to go to school anymore. I always wanted to take off to Moncton. Moncton was my place. I was talking to several different men, and like men that are a lot older than me, and I was vulnerable at the time, being only 14, 15 years old. It was easy for older men to prey on me. And when I speak older men, I don't mean like fathers, I mean like 25, 26, 27, 28-year-olds. These men saw me as nothing but a sex object. So I was taken for granted. I would believe what they had to say to me, believe their lies, and I believe that these people or this person really loved me. And at 15, you don't know what love is. You don't have a clue what love is. So yeah, I would frequently hang out with this one guy, and I would talk to him all day long, all hours of the night, and I would share my whole life with him. And I thought, you know, he's 25 years old. He's so mature. Like, his life is so, like, I just can't wait to get to that age. I can't wait to not have my mom on my back anymore and just do what I want. And so, yeah, he made me fall in love with him, and I really believed it. And one night we were at a cabin party. My friend was having a party. It was a high school party, and of course I was invited because I dated a high school guy at the time. We were kind of separated, going through whatever. And this guy was there, the 25-year-old who I was so in love with, who I've been talking to since I was 12 years old. I thought the world of this guy, and I thought he was so cool. You know, he had his own place, and, you know, his own vehicle, and his own money. And I wanted to go home that night, and I remember getting a drive home with him and his friends. And we actually broke down on the side of the road, and we had to get some random old guy to bring us home. And I remember them, it was all guys, they were making jokes about me. And just like, oh, look at this hot 15-year-old girl we just picked up. And, you know, she's coming back to my place tonight. And so whatever, you know, I thought it was cool. I was getting the attention on me. And we get back to his place, and there's a few of us still there and playing guitar, and, you know, we're talking. And I go and I sit next to him, and I have this tattoo. I've had it since I was, I don't know, 14? So I was 15 at the time. And he takes his cigarette and he completely outs it on my tattoo. And I thought this was like really weird, but at the same time I tried to act like I was so tough, and like, you know, it didn't even bother. You remember in middle school or elementary, when they say boys will actually pick on you because they like you? So that's what I thought this was. It was getting later in the night, and I was pretty intoxicated, and I just lived down the hill. I wanted to go home. And he sent everyone home, and I thought for sure, oh, here's my cue to go home. But no, I stayed because I was vulnerable, and I really, really, really had feelings for this guy. And I thought, wow, like, you know, he really loves me. He wants something with me. We're gonna be in a relationship. I don't have to go into details because I'm sure you guys can figure out what happened after this. Needless to say, he took advantage of I don't know how to say this. He took advantage of me being young. He used that to his advantage, I guess. And again, vulnerable, naive. I liked to drink at the time. He had cigarettes, I wanted cigarettes. And I remember halfway through having sex with this man, he looked at me and he said, "You can't ever tell anybody about this." And I was like, why? Why not? And he says, because I can go to jail and I can be put away for a really long time. And I was like, but I thought you loved me, and I thought age was just a number. So I ended up sleeping there. When I woke up in the morning, my friend came to pick me up at the door. And he reminded me before I left not to tell anybody. And I told her that day because I felt like I had to. And I mean, she was kind of weirded out. I was 15, he was 25. So I remember getting home and I felt like, I just felt crappy. I just felt like I gave myself away to somebody who didn't even really probably like me. And I remember messaging him about it and like, hey, like I had fun last night, you know, hope we can do it again. And he answers back with, please don't ever talk about this online ever again. I don't want to talk about it. What happened was a mistake. It'll never happen again. And then a week later, it's back to the same thing. I love you and I care about you, Brie, and I want to be with you, but we can't be together. And I was just caught up in this mess of, I don't know what. I don't know. So that screwed me up a lot. And then I started to let myself believe he was just my best friend. But when you're 25, your best friend isn't 15. When you're 25, you don't have sex with a 15-year-old. You just don't. It's common sense. I'm saying a lot. So this is where my life started to really fucking spiral. I got back with my ex. I was about 15 again, still. Just turned 16 maybe. And I started doing speed again because he was selling it. And I thought it was so cool. So I actually ended up in the Moncton Hospital with a kidney infection because I was overdosing on speed. And when the doctor sent me home, he said to me, you know, Brianna, you really can't be doing this stuff. You're so young. Your kidneys are already damaged as they are because I was born with smaller kidneys and lesser functioning kidneys than normal. If you continue this, there might be one day where you have to be put on dialysis. And I was like, what? Like, who cares? So I got home and of course I put myself out of line about this big and I did it all and I went to bed. In the morning, my cheeks were swelled up about this big because I had chewed all the inside of it. And finally, I realized it was time to come home. My mom didn't know anything about this at the time. Well, at least I think she didn't. And then I started doing speed every weekend. I would get a few dollars from my mom, a few from my dad. We'd all chip in. We'd get about, you know, like 8 to 10 speed and we'd all do them. We'd stay up for 4 days in a row, back to school during the week. And then it started getting to like 7 days a week, 8 days a week. And then the hallucinations started and the psychosis started and a lot of it was just driving me crazy and I couldn't handle being like that all the time. And I started to lose weight and I was like unrecognizable at one point. My face was really sunken in. My hair was always greasy. I just wasn't me anymore and I really didn't even know if I had found myself yet. So I was in about 10th grade in high school and I decided to take off for a couple weeks to Moncton because I met this new guy. I took the train to Moncton to meet him. Had never met him a day in my life before this, just Facebook. And I stayed with him for a couple weeks, but I had major anxiety about eating in front of people in general, let alone men. So I had starved myself for those 2 weeks. And I was very weak and I couldn't take it anymore. And I remember coming home and then every couple of weeks I'd go back and I'd be missing school time. And the most important classes in my life, I was missing my grade 10 science class, which we were doing chem and physics. When it came time for exam time, I didn't know anything, so I was accommodated and I was let out on an agreement that I couldn't ever take chem or physics in high school again. So that shortened up my career choices. I wanted to take the easy way out in high school, I took the easy classes. I wanted to do drugs in high school. I didn't feel like going anymore, but I still went because my mom was strict as fuck with that. You had to go to school. And if you're sick, you ain't watching TV and you're not going on your phone. I gotta give it to my mom because she really tried. She tried to enforce the rules and I just wanted to be free. I remember actually, like a flashback, I remember sitting there when I was 13 years old. I was at my grandmother's house, and it's like, wow, I'm finally 13. I can't wait until I'm 19 and I can do what I want. And here I am, I'm gonna be 23. Kids, if you're watching this, don't wish to grow up because it sucks. Just enjoy your teenage life. So yeah, all this drug abuse, this is where my mental illness started to develop even more, and I started to throw a lot of anger fits at home, and I was never really emotionally stable. I was up and down, my emotions were everywhere. I would often yell at my mom, I'd yell at my brother and I would fight a lot if I didn't get my way. I was abusive to my boyfriend in my relationship. I was manipulative. And I tried cutting myself with a pair of scissors, like eyebrow scissors, the tiny little ones. I tried to cut myself and I didn't like the pain. Just didn't feel right, so I stopped. But I often talked about suicide and crying my eyes out, and that's what I wanted in my life, because that's what I heard from my father, that he didn't want to live anymore. And I already had an uncle who had committed suicide. So I thought it was appropriate to talk about suicide and to joke about suicide, and it just wasn't. And I went through many counselors at this point. I graduated high school and I was dating who I thought was the love of my life. God bless his soul, because he's not with us today, but he was actually very abusive to me mentally, not so much physically, mentally, verbally. I was hidden from a lot of people. I was kind of taken as an object. To cope with a lot of this, I ate. I wasn't doing drugs at this point. I was eating, and I was stuffing my face with carbs. Anything I could get my hands on, I was stuffing my face because it just felt so good to me. It felt so right in my brain. And I started to gain weight, and people started to look at me differently, and I started to feel differently about my body, and I never really was secure with my body because I wasn't really taught to be secure with my body. So yeah, I started to date this guy, and I thought life was great. Really, it wasn't. I spent all of my graduation money on alcohol and food for him, and alcohol for myself, and I drank a lot that summer, and I got in a lot of fights that summer, and there's flies everywhere. My window's open. I got in a lot of fights that summer, fighting with my best friends, beating up my best friends, stealing vehicles. I didn't have a driver's license, breaking into houses. I was being charged for break and enter or unlawfully entering a dwelling. I was confronted by the cops many, many times. I was driven home with the cops a couple times. I had cops go to my mom's house and wake her up in the middle of the night. I had cops call my cell phone and tell me to just tone it down. I was just out of control, and I thought I was so cool. And little did I know that I was just struggling with myself, to find myself, because I never really knew who I was. And then he passed away. That hit me hard. That hit me probably the hardest. Yeah. Who I thought was the love of my life passed away in a tragic accident. And just months before this, I lost my grandmother, my best friend in the whole world. She really was. She was everything to me. She was my guidance in this world. She was who I could go to for advice, even if the advice made no sense, I took it. I know I'm kind of going backwards right now, but before she passed away, my grandfather had passed away 4 years before her. And my grandfather honestly was my first true love. He was the father figure in my life, and he was just always there for me no matter what. no matter what. When my parents were fighting, I escaped to my grandparents' house, and that was my getaway. So when I did the Bon Ami pageant, I actually dedicated my entire pageant, my talent to my grandmother, to my Nanny Harvey, and she was sitting in the audience with me that night. And I remember writing those speeches to her and telling her how much I loved her, and I hugged her so tight, and I presented her with that rose. And just a few months later, she got sick and she passed away with pulmonary fibrosis. I took that very hard because that was my graduating year, and I wanted nothing more than my grandmother to be with me at my graduation. I was very bitter at graduation. I was very bitter at my prom. I got down the Grand March and I started to cry right away, and I wanted nothing to do with it anymore because they weren't there. And the people who I depended on my whole life weren't there to watch me succeed. I'm sorry. Okay, so that was the summer that I was with Jody. And we went through a lot, almost 2 years together. And him and I broke it off on good terms. And I started to date Derek, and 2 months later I got the phone call that Jody had passed away. Like I had said in previous videos, he was who I thought was the love of my life. Like, I seriously thought he was the love of my life, you know, being only 18, 19, I thought he was the one. And he passed away tragically, and I took that extremely hard, and that's when I turned to cocaine. Cocaine helped me escape my reality. Just made me feel happy and numb at the same time. And the alcohol was helping to keep me numb. I loved it because I didn't have to think about what I was feeling. And what I was feeling was grief, and what I wasn't allowed to feel was grief. There were several people in my life who were preventing me from grieving. So yeah, I started off with cocaine. I started to spend my money on cocaine, and I started to spend a lot of money on cocaine. It was almost every night that we would do it, and I loved it. It was amazing. Like, it was a great buzz for me, and I would wake up in the morning and I would feel all those same emotions come back at me, but they'd hit me all at once. And I'd think about my grandmother and Jody and my grandfather and my uncles and everything in my life and everything that I've gone through and everything would come back to me that day. And then I would think about suicide, and then I'd want to kill myself. But I knew it was okay because I was getting cocaine again that night, and those feelings were gonna go away. And so I would do cocaine again that night, and those feelings went away, and it was a vicious cycle over and over and over and over of cocaine and alcohol and suicide and cocaine and alcohol and suicide, and emotions that rose from up and down an abusive relationship. And at this time, Derek and I were going through a lot. He was going through a separation from a marriage that he had been with his wife for many years. And I was grieving the loss of the love of my life, a grandmother, and at the time my maternal grandmother had passed away as well. And I just wanted to push all of this aside and just go numb, just go completely numb and forget that I just didn't have a purpose. I didn't have a purpose. I was off sick all the time. I was working at a grocery store where I started to do very questionable things, which resulted to me resulted in me losing my job. I was jobless. My boyfriend wasn't supportive. We were not on good terms. We were both just kind of like a rebound off of each other. There was a lot of fighting. There was a lot of emotional abuse. I had no motivation anymore to do anything or to carry on. So, what was the answer? Cocaine. Again, it was just a vicious cycle of cocaine, partying here and there and everywhere. And sometimes I'd do it by myself or with my friends. And it just got to be fun, and I didn't see a problem with it. And Derek and I, like I said, we were going through a lot of fucked up trauma and shit in our lives. We didn't care about one another. And October of last year, I decided to move out. And that's when I kind of got a hold of my life. I had done cocaine about 3 times when I moved out because it wasn't as easily accessible to me. And I was in college, and I just had a purpose at that point. I was in college and I was about to get my degree. So I did it. I got my college certificate. I passed with honors. I graduated with honors, I should say, as a personal support worker. And I was still kind of experimenting with drugs, doing whatever it took. But it took this one day where I sat down and I realized, like, Bree, you're not yourself anymore. And were you ever really yourself? And I took a long time to think to myself, I've never really found myself. I don't know who I am. I couldn't tell you my favorite color. I can't tell you my favorite song. I can't tell you my hobbies. I can't tell you my purpose in this world. I don't even know what my favorite thing to do is. And the emotions were changing as often as within minutes. Like I would feel high and down and high and down. And when I would feel an extreme high, I felt like I was on top of the world and I could accomplish anything. But after an extreme high always came an extreme low. And that's where I felt so low, where I felt like I could commit suicide. In March of 2018, I realized that this was getting out of control in my life and these emotions were taking over, and I had a nervous breakdown. I admitted myself to the psychiatric ward in Camilton, where I received treatment for 2 weeks. I received a diagnosis and I received medication. Note that I have seen psychiatrists in the past and I have been on medication in the past, but I chose not to believe it and I chose to ignore it, and I didn't take the medication. But this time I knew it was real because this time I wanted help because I was fed up. I'm 22. I can't keep living my life like this. I was diagnosed with general anxiety disorder, depression, C-PTSD, borderline personality disorder, and bipolar. Having all of these together is hell. I'm not gonna lie, it's hell. It's medication. It's 6 pills in the morning, 3 at night. It's heavy sedative medication to help control my thoughts and my mind and my moods. Because I get manic and I get up and I get down, and you know what? Recovery is not linear. Like, it's gonna be like this, and maybe it's even gonna fucking go like this. I don't know. I was doing great for myself. I decided I wanted to be sober after that and take my medication as prescribed. And some medication wasn't working, so, you know, just going back and forth from the doctor. And then he suggested that I take DBT, which is dialectical behavior therapy. And it is a therapy that was written by Marsha Linehan, and she discovered it, and I think in the 80s or 90s. It's actually a method that you can not so much cure borderline personality disorder, but learn effective ways to cope with it and eventually get over it, because it's a disorder and it's not an illness. So it's kind of just a personality disorder that you need to get yourself out of and learn different traits. And I've been doing this since April, I want to say, and it's been helpful. We're off for the summer, but I go back in September. Stop saying So yeah, I chose to recover. And like I said, recovery is not linear. So I still have my ups and downs. I still struggle with my drugs and I still struggle with my alcohol, but I make an effort. I make a huge effort. My house is clean today. Yesterday it wasn't clean because yesterday I just couldn't get out of bed until 2 o'clock. Today I got out of bed at 8:30. I never know what tomorrow's gonna be, and I never know what the rest of my day is gonna be. But what I do know is that I'm choosing recovery and I'm choosing to get help. I would talk with you guys about every single diagnosis and what it is, but I think that would take up a lot of time and it might be really, really boring. But if you're interested, I will leave the diagnoses in the in the information, so you guys can actually look them up yourselves and maybe it'll help you understand me better. I don't expect anybody to understand somebody who deals with mental health or mental illness. Somebody who doesn't deal with it, it could be very hard to understand. So I just wanted to share my story with you. This isn't obviously for attention or for a pity party. I just wanted to share my story because I'm not afraid or ashamed of it anymore, and I felt like I had to get that out there. And I just want to show you guys, I made myself a little weekly chores list of everything that I have to do during the week and what I have to do daily to help me, to remind my brain that I need to get up and I need to do things and I need to clean the house. So this is my story and I share it proudly, and I really hope you enjoyed this video. Like, share, subscribe, do whatever it takes, comment, give me some feedback, and I'm actually gonna surprise you guys with 2 videos this week.